Okay, ready, John?
Yep.
Okay, it is 7 o'clock. This is the February meeting of the Virginia-Highland Civic Association Board of Directors. President is Mr. Becker, Ms. Wyndham, Ms. Carlisle, Ms. License, Ms. Taylor, Ms. Ragland, Jewel, and Ms. Is that everyone?
I'm here too, Jack.
Mr. Brandon Murphy, thank you, sir. All right, there's an agenda in front, and we have a motion to adopt it.
So moved.
Any changes? Those? That objection is adopted. We have no police and fire rep, so we'll pause for them if they come in. And it's unclear if Mr. Wan was going to make it, but he might. Let's go right to the planning committee. And Ms. Carlisle.
So, yeah, first on linear, right?
Yes, please.
V14-205, 1158 Linear Boulevard, and we have the applicants here to go over their plans for construction there. And I'm just presenting to everyone up here.
You want me to present to the people behind her?
You can kind of stand over there and hit us all, if
Yeah.
you will.
Please.
This is V14-305, 1158 Virginia Avenue, zoning is R4. Applications for a reduction in side yard setback on the southern side, because it's a nominally a half-depth front yard, that is a side street. It was from 17.5 to 3 feet. Mr. Hughes.
I got all things for you while you're pointing to you. That helps.
Okay. Okay, so my name's George Andrews, and my wife and I own we own a house on Lanier Boulevard, 1158 Lanier Boulevard, and we also own the empty lot behind it, which is essentially on Rosewood. And the lot is unique in that it's a corner lot, because there's a City of Atlanta street planned here called Johnson Street, but I say planned because it was never actually built. So the city owns the property. It's a swath of land, I guess 60 feet wide, I think, that was originally to be paved back in the early 1900s, but they never built it. As far as we know, they never will. So because it's a corner lot, the side of the lot has a corner setback, 17.5 feet, as opposed to what you might typically see in a center lot, which would be much less. So what we're interested in doing is we want to tear down the house that's there. And the house that's there, by the way, does not comply with the current setback. It's over the setback line. And we want to build a house that also sits over the setback line. We're in fact asking for it to sit up to 3 feet from the property line. And so this is a survey of how it is now. So we had a meeting last week, and we discussed the plans. I guess we should probably look at this one. And just see so this is the same lots then, and this, I guess we can pass it around if you want to see more detail. This shows the outline of the house. The house is designed to have a porch on the front that wraps around to the side, and so the bulk of the structure that is within that property line is all porch. And what we discussed last week was that because the house will be so close to the public right away, we would put in some plantings that would serve as a screen to try to make that public right away less obnoxious to the homeowners, which would be us. We're not planning to build this as a spec house. Let's see, any other key points? The plantings are all on the public right away. So this, I guess, right now it's kind of a mix of just empty, there's some concrete in the area, there's some overgrowth, there's some just grassland, there's some dead trees, So I guess this is an improvement in some respect, in that will improve the drainage by removing concrete, and will remove dead trees, and of course add more trees. Ways to improve the area.
Let me go a little further on the landscape.
Why don't you introduce yourself, sir?
My name's Peter Frawley. I'm a landscape architect working with George and Brennan on their house. And we've worked with, kind of bounced it around with Jack a little bit on trying to screen the house if we get down to a 3-foot setback. The drainage on the two lots heads down and typically goes across the right of way. So what we're proposing is, these plants will act as a screen, but we're also going to do a water quality trench or swale through this area to City-Highland water quality standards. The plants that we've chosen for the screen also double as water quality plants. They're all medium plant lists for City-Highland water quality. So our intent is to do kind of a twofold thing with this 10 feet, 3 feet, and probably 7 to 10 in the right-of-way itself. Is the plantings will serve as a screen from anyone who intends to use this as a pedestrian, because the applicant has acknowledged that the right-of-way remains a right-of-way and is subject to public use, whether it be a road or a walking trail or whatever. So the plants will act as a screen for the house and the people that use the right-of-way and capture some of the drainage. We seem to have a little bit of flooding that's going on down here. The system itself, the catch basins seem to be a little bit clogged, but it's also a low point in this area down here. We'll be removing concrete paving that's in the right-of-way presently, so it should improve the situation with the addition of water quality soils in that area. There's a 30-inch magnolia tree that's pretty special in front of the lot there, and we work with Frank Mobley to do whatever we can to save that tree, and probably have a pretty good chance of doing that. The way the design sits right now with the walks and removing some paving.
Do you want to show where the tree is, even though it's not on there, and that it's a pretty big diameter?
No, it's this 30-inch magnolia right here.
30 foot.
30 inch.
30
30
inch diameter.
Oh, okay. I thought
Probably-
you meant
Probably
this.
30 feet tall.
Why don't you mention the rear of the lot, because that came up as
The rear of the lot, you see these little black dots here, that's the tree cover that's on that lot right now. That particular lot is pretty open, it's grassed, and since it's not wooded per se, the drainage kind of rushes off of it. So we're going to be working between the two lots, directing the water down here, but also between the lots to capture the water, and again, install some water quality to mitigate the speed of the water that's coming off of the uphill lot.
And if I may other just points that I think are important to understand. So we recognize that we're asking for a 3-foot setback, which is beyond the usual of 7 for a center lot. And I don't want to put words in Jack's mouth, but I think the idea was we're offering to do work in the public right of way to make that more amenable to the board or to those making the decision. And the point of that 3-foot setback is to move the house further south, not because the house is overly wide, but there's a lot of room here, there's a lot of land, and we're trying to create more room up here. So on this side of the house is where the driveway goes. So the bulk of the house up here is actually about an 18-foot setback, whereas again, normally it would be 7, except for the fact that there's a portico shade. So there's some structure that is a 7-foot setback, but all the living quarters are about 18 feet from this property line over here. So I know initially, I think some people may have had the idea that we're trying to build an extremely wide house and therefore wanted additional footage bring up to 3 feet. But in fact, it's probably not any wider than a typical house on the street.
Is anybody here in opposition specifically to this? Any questions for anyone, from anyone, audience or board, for the applicant or Mr. Foley?
I wanted to add, I'm sorry, from the site visit that, this is just conjecture or opinion, but the house is, it's not one of the typical Virginia-Highland houses. I'm not sure when it was built, but it has kind of the shingle type siding and that kind of thing. So they are tearing down a house, but it's one I personally will not miss, and my standards I think are fairly high. Also, I don't know, there's in the right of way or the public, where the street is, there's also some pavement that they've mentioned that we will talk to the city potentially about taking that pavement out so that there's even more water that can be soaked into the ground there, but it's on city property, so we need to talk to them about it. They're taking out the part that's on their, that they can on their property.
I'm assuming they won't do that anytime soon. It's perfectly used.
Oh, for the house, for the
Yeah, in
existing
other
house
words,
there.
I mean, I don't know if your intention was to have that.
Our experience at the city has not been that anyone they
Pretty much about from Monday morning.
If you have other experiences, we'd love to have you up here.
Right.
Debbie, you had a question?
Yeah, I have several questions. How large is the lot behind the house that you?
Well, when you say how large is it, how many square feet is it?
Yeah.
That's a good question. It's a triangular shaped lot, I can tell you that, and I can give you dimensions. You know the formula for an area of a triangle? I
Yeah,
don't
but I
know.
think it's over the minimum R4
It's over
thing.
the-
It's a weird triangle size, but I think it is.
I mean,
It's over.
I mean, it meets
It's pretty
the,
good size. We could look at it.
I mean, you're wondering if it meets the.
Yeah, I just wanted to know how large the lot
Oh,
was and whether or not someone, not you, I'm sure, but someone would want to develop it at some point.
It is
so that-
developable. is my-
But only for one house, and if you can
Yes,
see the
only for
smaller
one.
triangle in the right corner, that's actually the buildable size because of the frontage of the street, so.
Which means that
It would be
the
very
street
little.
could be used as access to get to that.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, because we've owned this for a while and thought about building there instead of here, but in any case, there's a street that runs here.
Right.
So the most easy access is from the street right onto the lot.
There's a curb cut there currently, actually, because that's where.
Yeah,
the
there's
street
a
was
curb
slated to go.
cut, just like there's a curb
Yeah, there's
cut
a curb cut.
down here, there's another one up here.
And then
Stephanie,
it's very
I'm
steep
sorry,
here.
did you
I
have
had
a
one
question?
other question, if that's okay. I missed the distances on your north side yard setback.
Over here,
Yeah.
well, there's a porte cochere,
Right,
which is
how far is the porch?
7 feet.
the porte cochere is 7 feet from the
7
side.
feet, yeah.
But then what I was saying was the rest of the house was not.
Yeah,
So
okay.
it
I think that's, I thought it was something.
Stephanie?
I didn't understand the issue with the magnolia tree in the front.
Well, it's just within a certain distance, it's within the critical root area of the
Well,
house.
the structural root plate probably won't be impacted. The house that sits on there right now actually sits within the critical root zone, so the trees growing around.
It's in the
that.
buildable area.
It's in the buildable area.
The new house may impact it.
The new house.
So there's question about whether,
Well, it's the percentages of the critical root zone, and
the percentage is what now?
the percent, I don't know what it is off the top of my head right now.
Oh, okay.
But it's, I would estimate, I think we did this last week, we went 30 feet in, maybe about 15% right now.
Okay.
Well, it's got to be worked out anyway.
But it's got to be worked out. I mean, I'm going to sit down with
There's been
Franklin
a-
actually.
well, it was one of the conditions that we asked them for. Other questions?
Well, can I just point out that, just so you're clear, that house we're proposing will sit right over the existing house.
So I think that's,
Except
That
that there's a
critical
walkway
root
that's
zone
going
is-
straight up the middle that is not there right now.
That's-
Right, so that will have an impact. That's the impact. So it's not exactly the same.
Well, that's right.
There is an additional impact on the tree. No, well, it actually makes a big difference from the tree's point of view. If you want to move the walkway over to the left, then.
but there's some
the
mitigating
tree
things that
wouldn't mind.
Frank has some construction detailing for a walkway like that that will lessen that.
So we did any other questions? So we did a site visit, and our report is written up here, although I don't have any folks got it. It's an unusual lot. For one thing, one of the most unusual pieces of that is it actually fits the R4 criteria, which is very unusual in Virginia-Highland. Many pretty high percentage of houses do not meet the R4 criteria in each and every dimension. But we don't get many. This is a really unusual circumstance. They have it right away. So, sorry, we're about to lose one of our most distinguished members here, which is the youngest Kenan. And our concern, we had two concerns right away. One was that the, going to 3 feet left from the public right-of-way left a real potential for folks using the right-of-way, which is eligible to be used now, which I appreciate your cheerful acknowledgement of that, even though it's not being used now, it will never be, but it is. Folks are legally, as we understand it, able to walk up and down it right now, even though it's not very passable, but who knows in the future. Some avid pedestrians. And we were worried about absence, lack of privacy and crashing up against you. We were also worried, we want to assume that the lot in the rear will be developed at some point. If it's not, that's great, but if it is, hello sir, how are you? If it is, then we'll be with you very soon. Then we want the house, we don't want that to be a friction point in your proximity. So Peter laid out the likely road, Chip agreed with this layout of what the road would be. It's a 50-foot right-of-way. The road at 24 to 26 feet would leave an ample amount of room, and it would likely be, given the sewer line placement, right in the middle of the right-of-way. So there would be additional public space on each side where the applicants have proposed planting in that public space. They proposed planting a series of trees that I think will have a huge impact on sucking up some of the water there, particularly if that magnolia is lost, which we would all hate. And they proposed dealing with some of the water arriving from the rear of the property. During our visits, Lola and I made 2, and there were a couple of others that were just made informally looking at the site after rains. There's a fair amount of water collecting down there. It's a low point. So we really do want to get that water absorbed very well. So those were concessions they proposed. As it turned out, in the right-of-way, there's at the planning committee hearing, heard from neighbors, and there's a grill and some other accoutrements that have been built in the right-of-way over the decades that are sitting there cheerfully. But
Not ours.
no,
The other day,
no, I didn't.
I
Hope I
hope
didn't say that.
everybody else needs.
No, not yours, not yours at all. So that it might someday have to be dealt with, but the real question was whether or not this ecologically, from our point of view, how much water can be soaked up. We don't usually get too many chances to look at variances where the lot is full-sized. Normally in Virginia-Highland, the recent practice of the VHCA has been to grant a lot of variances almost automatically if the lot is undersized, and since most lots are undersized, the variance requests have been coming kind of like Halloween candy and being granted the same way, and we do a lot of negotiating to try to mitigate and come to a deal beforehand. Here's one that our planning consultant, Mr. Fortner, pointed out that, gosh, gee, the VCA might not even automatically approve it. That said, I think after asking for a number of concessions here, the ones that have already been mentioned, including not opposing the removal of the tarmac, of the concrete and asphalt whenever the city can be persuaded to get to it, and planting these additional trees in there and leaving room for the street. And the trees in the right-of-way that Peter is talking about are to the side of where the road would be, so they should not interfere with the road construction. I think the majority of the committee, I thought, was persuaded that this was generally an upgrade, especially for a lot that is not likely not likely to be changed in the near future and would function if it were. Is there other comments from David? Do you have any? You were there, Jess. Anyone else who was at the planning committee have a comment about it?
No.
So, do you want
What is the square footage of the lot?
Mr. Frawley? It's over the minimum.
on the application.
Well, here it says 12,812.
12,800.
No, they certainly could build a house there without it. They've come to us with a proposal to build a house with this variance, so they very much could build a house without it, absolutely they could. They couldn't build a house that they want to build there without it. So that's what we consider is the house that people come to us with. We try to work with them to see if there's a way to achieve what they want to do within the confines of the stormwater ordinance and the general principles being brought forward. So, but the answer to your question is absolutely, they could build a house there without this. And they cheerfully agreed to that.
That's absolutely true.
However, that's not what's in front of us.
And the lot
Well-
coverage is 44% or less.
What, could you repeat that?
44% lot coverage.
Current?
Of the, no, of the
Proposed.
proposed.
Proposed. Any other comments or thoughts? Lola, would you like to give a recommendation to the planning committee?
Yeah, the planning committee, and I'll make this a motion, recommended approval of V14-305, based on them presenting a site plan that matches the one we signed, which I looked at, that's stamped and dated by the city. This is dated February 6, 2015. That appears to match it exactly. Do you want to, should we go through the conditions that you have?
Well, the conditions are on there. The applicant, they're actually printed on the site plan. We're sneaking it in the side door by printing them in tiny print on the site plan so that they'll become part of the recorded conditions of the city. But they specify the trees, the ball cypress and other trees, the hollies that are on there, the grasses and ground covers in the rear of the property. The applicant acknowledges the public right-of-way and agrees not to contest lawful use of it, and you may contest any unlawful use of it that you like. And the applicant agrees to not to oppose our efforts to get the concrete removed. And I will only say that I think I was personally convinced and remain convinced that there will be more water leaving this uptaken by the plantings in a couple of years than we have there now, and the site would be in a better condition from stormwater perspective than it currently is, which is very, very weak.
The one part that I don't see that was on the other one is that you acknowledge that Johnson Street is a public road and may be utilized for pedestrian use. You have that you acknowledge that the existing pavement is not a part of the subject property, but that part is not on there, which we would like for that to be.
Very much so. That must have been
But
inadvertently dropped, I take it.
The whole thing was copied over, so maybe just
So
So-
if you can get that added, that should be a condition.
to add it, do we redo it, I mean, read it down there?
The Johnson Street is a public road and that any time may be utilized for pedestrian.
So I see.
So that you're getting your attorney down by this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll adjust it.
Okay.
So that's the motion. Second, any further comments from anyone? Questions from anyone? Thoughts? Thank you, ma'am. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And it is unanimous. We will, you've got to refile it with that one additional condition. Thank you very much, sir. We'll see you at the VCA, at the NPUF next Monday at 7 o'clock, and maybe a little later on the agenda time-wise than we were tonight. And Ms. Skavinsky's running a much quicker meeting, so maybe it won't be so late. All right, you're welcome to stay, but if you don't want to, you don't. We won't take it out of here. Thank you all. Thank you, Brian, for the story.
Or is this your only stamp?
No,
copy?
that's it, this too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Peter, your name will come up later tonight as we talk about
Yeah.
John Hall.
That one? Sorry. That's the.
Okay, next item.
I was waiting on
Let's
it.
move.
We have a liquor application.
Well, shouldn't we let Jack,
Oh, my apologies, so short is the memory. Please.
Good evening. How y'all doing?
Very well.
Name's Major Peak for those that I haven't had the pleasure of meeting. Zone 6 Commander for the eastern portion of the city of Atlanta. Just wanted to come by. I know I believe it's Lieutenant Floyd is usually one of the ones that comes by and speaks to you all, but top of the year, and I just wanted to get by and at least see your faces and to receive any concerns that you all may have as it pertains to crime or quality of life type issues. We've been pretty, we've had a relatively fortunate 2014, so we're into 2015 and looking to see what we can do differently, and naturally we want to do things even better than we did in 14. We're still just battling vehicle break-ins. That's really the biggest thorn in our side that we deal with. We continuously leave the city with arrests. It doesn't necessarily mean they stay in jail, unfortunately, but we have a lot of different enforcement maneuvers that we are doing. We've stepped up some of our crime prevention inspections as well as our crime suppression team, so you'll hopefully see a lot more visibility, and we'll be doing some things a little differently than we did to try to increase our productivity as far as trying to stop those types of crimes. So far, they are relatively down, but it's early in the year, so we expect that. So as the season gets warmer, you know, we still tell you to please put that clean car campaign, push it out for us, and just keep all items out of those vehicles unless you're riding in them. But when you get out, you know, clean them out when you go in the house and don't leave anything in there. And that helps us a great deal, but, you know, we'll be out there still trying to capture those that are responsible. But I'll be willing to entertain any questions.
I just had a comment just to let you know that Lieutenant Floyd he comes to, if not every meeting, almost every meeting, and he always provides good information, so we very much appreciate him, and
Well, thank you.
he's doing a very good job in keeping us informed, so.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. I'll make sure I let her know that as well.
I have a quick question. I live on Virginia and I'm right across from the new middle school.
Yes, ma'am.
So I love the sting operations that my teenage daughters get to watch with the roll through of the stop sign at Barnett and, you know, DUIs and all that good stuff because they've learned their lesson. But I have a question. Of the people, I mean, we see maybe 20, 30 cars pulled over on a certain night into the Inman parking lot. Of those, and maybe you don't know, but what are the statistics? I mean, are you all handing out a lot of DUIs in our neighborhood, or, I mean, I know it's the bar scene people coming through, but.
Yeah, and I don't have the specifics on the actual number of DUI arrests for that particular, for your beat as it relates to what we're doing. We are trying to push out that enforcement, and I don't know if you've noticed here recently on news where there was a big issue about our DUI task force being disbanded, and that's not true. It's not being disbanded, but what they're basically doing is once upon a time it fell under what we call field operations, which is your Zone 6 command. We're in field operations. Or we had a department restructured some years ago and it was moved into our community-oriented policing section. Well, what they're trying to do is reallocate it to field operations so that we can better get them into the areas that they need to be in at the proper time, so that ultimately they're more successful, they're training and working alongside of some of our field units so that we, you know, actually expand our expertise in DUI enforcement, and hopefully we can keep people from driving drunk on our Atlanta roads. So that's what it is. So they'll be around, and hopefully you'll see some more enforcement maneuvers, and we'll be trying to step them up as well. Yes, ma'am.
At that same spot, that stop sign on Virginia and Barnett, a lot of times I see the Georgia State Patrol there. Why would they be there?
We invite them. They come down into the city for that very same purpose of DUI enforcement. What we do is we try to look at giving you all some of our secrets. We try to look at some of the thoroughfares in and out of some of your club and bar districts. Naturally, they have to get there through North Highland, Johnson Road, Virginia, or back off of Ponce. So we've invited them for quite some time to come down and help us with enforcement. Actually, it also goes as a way of a crime deterrent, and as many police officers you can get into an area, we think the safer it is. So they come down, they'll do some of those enforcement DUI maneuvers, and it's helpful for us. So that's why you see them out there, and I hope you see a lot more of them as well. Yes, sir.
Major, I saw a piece of AJC today on tag cameras. It's kind of controversial.
Yes, sir. I mean, we've had them for years.
Do we have them in our neighborhood?
There is, Zone 6 has a car with the tag reader on there, and that's one of our traffic enforcement vehicles. Yes, they're out there and they're utilizing it daily.
But otherwise, they're not posted on stop signs and red lights?
Not posted on stop signs or red lights. we will welcome them, and here's the key, and I know it gets into people when they consider their rights. Only place they are being considered, or for that matter, deployed, are public places. I mean, even if you put them in certain areas, certain neighborhoods, they've shown to be very helpful. Nobody's going back looking, trying to figure out who's hanging in a particular area, but when we put out what we call BOLOs, let's say there was a car involved in a robbery in Southwest Atlanta, we enter that tag information. Those tag readers, you could be in Northeast Atlanta and just happen to ride by that camera. It lets us know, hey, this particular vehicle that we're looking for was just spotted in this particular area. So then we're able to send people to that area, set up perimeters, and try to find them. So by no stretch of the imagination are they ever used for any type of, intrusive issues as far as where you're going, tracking who. We don't have time for that. We have a hard enough time tracking.
I'm coming from the other end.
The other end, such as?
Well, I pretty much try not to break the law, and I'm not cheating on my wife, so I'd like to see more of this.
I'm with you.
Because we've got people coming through the neighborhood or breaking into cars and that sort of thing, and I would think that would be a great resource.
Great tool. I agree with you 100%. And ultimately, as time goes on, as things change, case laws change, and you have different controversies that are taking place. And sometimes you'll have groups that feel as though it's intrusive, but by no means is it intrusive. I mean, yes, we want to deter and detect criminal activity. If you're not doing anything wrong, you don't have anything to worry about whatsoever. Keep riding. It's in public view. We're not putting it in your yard, trying to figure out who's coming to your house. There are generally major intersections, and they're just looking at those cars when you're getting those hits. Be it wanted people, be it targets for human trafficking, criminal activity is the only thing it's used for whatsoever.
So make me think the principle about visibility, high visibility, is that just by far the lights, visible things, signage, those are progressive and effective deterrents in your view?
Absolutely. As much as you can keep your lots fully lit so that, everybody can see what's going on, your floodlights, and it doesn't matter where you are. I tell my neighbors the same thing. You just have to keep those lots well lighted, and then that way you don't have any issues whatsoever. We'll be as visible as we can, but naturally, we always depend on your eyes and ears. So when you all are seeing things, if you believe it's suspicious, and even if it just don't border what you need, if something is in your gut, go ahead and give us a call and we'll respond. And if it doesn't rise to anything, then we send people on and let them move on about their day-to-day activities.
I was talking about police presence in general, but
Yes.
the high visibility is.
Yes,
Any other
absolutely.
questions for the major? We all second Ms. Keenan's remarks, and thanks for coming by, for you to come by, and thanks to Major Lieutenant Floyd. We miss him. He usually comes, even if he comes at 8:30 after 3 other meetings. So.
Yeah, there are 3 meetings actually going on right now, so I told him I would take care of this one and send him to the other one, and I'm gonna meet him. So I try to get out as well, so we just get busy, but I really appreciate you all's help in what we're dealing with.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Y'all take care.
All right, bye-bye. We have a liquor application and liquor license application. You're going to tell me all this stuff.
Yeah, introduce yourself and go over the business name and what you're doing, change of ownership and all that.
Sure. I'm Mark Pinsky. I'm Regional Director for Here to Serve Restaurants. You probably know us best by Noche, which has been there for almost 16 years
Spell your name.
P-I-N-S-K-Y.
Thanks.
And basically, we didn't really want anything to change, but through the process of the lovely divorce, the ownership has changed with our company, which has turned out to be an excellent thing. All of the operators involved, myself for 11 and a half years, the Director of Operations for 12 years, the management staff, and actually all the service and bar staff at this Noche. Pretty much everyone has been there for at least 8 years. We'll all remain the exact same. It's just the technicality of changing the liquor license to the new owner of the company, who is the ex-wife of the former.
And that's Francis Lee.
Yeah,
Right.
Lee.
Catholic.
I just learned about the Francis thing recently.
Okay.
So the training program will all change.
We plan on changing nothing about the operation whatsoever, just continually trying to maintain the upkeep of it.
Any liquor license violations, any charges about any appearances before the license review board?
We have had one in our no chain findings, and that was the only violation in
It was underage serving?
It was an underage service, and since then, we now require every everyone that serves alcohol in the company, it's managers as well, to undergo a certification training, because that was quite a shock to us. So we do liquor service.
And the manager on duty typically who acted, if there were a problem, you would want us to contact who exactly?
Well, Robert Tussey is the general manager there. He's been there for a while. And so is Natalie, the two managers. They're very easily contacted, and they're there every night of the week. So, in fact, I'll go see them in a few minutes.
Any questions from anybody, from anyone in the room? Mr. Pinsky? All right, sir, Lola, do you have a recommendation?
Sure, we'll move to recommend approval of the change of ownership of the license at Noche to Francis Lee Smith Casserole.
Thank you very much, and thanks for supporting our restaurant.
We haven't voted on it.
It was heading in the right direction.
So I sit here and raise my hand.
Great.
Any other questions or comments? All of it's been moved and seconded. All in favor, please raise your hand. Sir, now you may stop.
My previous comments.
Thank you very much. So we'll see you, Ms. Catherall will be next, at the end of you next week.
I believe so, yeah. Oh, is it the same time?
7 o'clock, but it's not here, it's at Hillside.
Okay.
And the address is on, but take a look. It's on Monroe, and sometimes if you get there late, you probably want to write down Lola's phone number. It's convenient sometimes.
Will you need her there as opposed to someone like myself? Okay, that's all I'm used to.
Yeah, it's going to be a big issue under the circumstances, but because you've been going so long.
And she told me, I think, that she plans to come to the interview.
Okay, that sounds great.
But let her know that would be great.
All right, I certainly will. Thanks again.
Thank you. All right, we're on to the VHC Inman plea appeal and the Inman issue in general, which will all be folded into the same piece. Actually, we have not heard back, and I'm trying to find out if the tree appeal had been, so I don't know what that is. At this moment, it's still on for a week from tomorrow. I anticipate, at least that our appeal, part of the appeal will become moot, but I've not heard formally from Kathy, and would like to hear that. And we have no other specific update, no other news that we haven't reported other than the letter from the superintendent, which appeared and was distributed widely here, noting that the latest school projections for attendance next year provided in January from the elementary schools. Typically, they show a decline in attendance right after the first of the year. This year, they showed an increase. That plus the numbers that were larger at the start of the year made complete hash of their projections for being able to handle the expansion. This is old news, we've all heard it, but so they at least, for the moment, they deferred approving the construction contract that was on their January board meeting, and they held it off for a month. Matt Westmoreland, in a conversation with us directly, said that he was now convinced that pretty well that there was simply no way to provide, to absorb the expansion any further at Inman. And that was an interesting remark, since that was, anyway, it was delightful to hear it, but they have not taken that action formally. We hope to hear the superintendent comment on it at the meeting, which is a week from this Thursday at Inman at 6:30. In that meeting, she postulated a couple of other variables, including the possibility of Druid Hills coming into Atlanta, which would require first a motion to be passed in the General Assembly, allowing a referendum this fall, a positive vote on that, and presumably surviving a potential challenge from the Camp County, promised from the Camp County school system. So presumably we'll hear from that. The immediate outcome is that there will be 6 No, make that 8, said Betsy. Lockman Trailers at Inman this fall. And our immediate reaction, which I've shared, which the planning, more trailers. Because the immediate reaction was, my immediate reaction was to write and try to talk about where those trailers would be placed at Inman. The logical and a very possible locale is the Field of Dreams, but it's not settled, and we hope to hear something on that a week from Thursday. But I know Lee is here and wants to speak from some of the local neighbors, so Lee, please speak right up.
Okay, thank you, Jack. And several of us are here from Clemont Drive and surrounding streets. And our concern really, I mean, Jack, you've summarized it well, but our concern is that Inman, of course, was built originally as an elementary school. And we feel like it has far exceeded its capacity on the land where it now sits. And it's just not good for the students, and it's not good for the neighborhood to cram so many students on that small plot of land that exceeds the APS standards by several acres. APS itself has said that a minimum acreage for a middle school should be 12 acres, whereas Inman sits on roughly a little less than 7 acres. And that's far less than the Board of Education standards, which dictate a minimum of 19.5 acres for a middle school. So our position has always been, we support the school, we support the good work that goes on there, but the building itself and the land that it sits on is not sufficient to serve the enrollment. And we would like to know if the board would be willing to make a stand or a statement to that effect. And what we're saying is consistent with the Virginia-Highland Master Plan, which opposed any future expansion on that property. And it also is in keeping with the graded cluster analysis that the Virginia-Highland Civic Association conducted back in January of 2013. I don't know if the rest of our contingency here has anything to add.
Well, I would just add, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I would just add, Lee, that everything that you said, and feel very strongly, Jack, that in the absence of a strategic facilities plan for the cluster, we would like for the association to take a very strong stand on the fact that we cannot continue to expand at Inman Middle School. And there is no strategic plan.
Page 99, Laura.
I just saw that.
Oh, in the master plan, yeah, page 99. And I can read you the language so that everybody can hear it. It says, with regard to the Inman Middle Campus, work with APS officials to prevent further overdevelopment of the Inman Middle Campus to ensure that the school maintains a healthy balance of facilities and resources for the number of students that currently use the campus. So, I mean, the population, obviously, in the in-town neighborhoods will continue to grow in many years into the future. And we applaud Soften's decision to, at this point in time, not proceed with the expansion. You know, there's a temporary halt anyway, but we would like to see that halt a permanent one. And we'd like to state that we think that any more construction on the current Inman campus that would expand either the footprint and or enrollment should not proceed.
I have just a question. I'm not sure what typically is done, but if we kind of, the master plan was voted on by, this board and the APU and the neighborhood and all of that. So to me, it seems that that might be sufficient without further action necessarily right now, because we've already, made a statement about those plans. And I think I don't know, it might be better for us to react, and we know we're watching it carefully, but to react to something that might be proposed now that they are rethinking this, as opposed to I mean, right now, we don't have a current plan, you know, to look at or react to. I'm just talking about, out loud here about what I'm just questioning that.
Well, and my perspective too on the master plan, that language and the plan was put in place reflecting the current expansion. So when they say further expansion, it was a further expansion after this expansion that had already been approved by, or proposed and seemed to be moving forward. So the further expansion, the language in the master plan was not referring to the current expansion that's now been put on hold. It was referring to any additional expansion. So that was the history and timeline around the master plan. Another thing too, to keep in mind, when the Virginia-Highland Civic Association did the traffic study that you're referring to, what was it, January 2013? What, 2013, yeah. So when we did that traffic analysis, looking at very objective figures, objective data, traffic data, and presented that to the city, we received significant comments from the neighborhood saying, we, residents of Virginia-Highland, fully support an expansion at Inman, and we do not support the Civic Association doing anything that would jeopardize that proposed expansion. All that being said, there's a significant divide in the community. So I think it would be inappropriate for the Civic Association to rule on something that hasn't been proposed because the current contemplated expansion has now been put on hold. So I think it'd be premature for us to issue any sort of statement, but also I think we would have to receive more input from the community because, as I said, there's a strong contingent. The Clemont neighbors feel very strongly, but we received very passionate and vocal criticism and opposition to the traffic study that was done. So it's just not a clear-cut issue.
Well, it's not, with what you're saying, I don't think, I mean, you're not saying that what our statement might be, you know, once we see what is coming. And we clearly know that, you know, we all feel pressure in this neighborhood with development and expansions and all those kind of things. And so I personally am sympathetic. I mean, Jack and I have, and several of us have been around and made sure you guys are aware of everything that's going on. So this, I think, my feelings about not saying anything or voting now do not mean that I'm unsympathetic to the issues, and that I know that we will plan as a planning committee to watch carefully and be prepared to react and take into consideration also the rest of the neighborhood. But as a planning committee, we look at impacts that are traffic, you know, infrastructure, all of those kinds of things. And the parents have, you know, their own ideas that they come to the table with as well, and those are education based, which we don't usually comment on.
I think our point of view in the immediate neighborhood is that it's just untenable. And the expansion that was proposed by the time it was finished in 2 years would not be sufficient for the student population. And I think that's why APS sort of backed off a bit. But even if they do any construction that changes the footprint of the school, it's still going to impact the neighbors the most. And I have great sympathy for parents. You know, parents want a sure thing for their children. They want to know what school they go to. They want it to be a quality school. But we also know that education is not at its best in overcrowded classrooms, you know, in an overcrowded campus. So, you know, our hope was that we could be unified, even in the statement that I think we've hit the wall, that something has to be looked at. And I know that this is a very difficult journey. It's a difficult journey for neighbors, it's a difficult journey for parents, but we've hit the wall. It can't get any bigger. So we have to get some creative thinking here to look at how can we best serve high school students, middle school students, and elementary school students in neighborhood schools.
Well, that we agree with, 100%, the last sentence. And I actually agree with your formulation, but it had a key dependent clause in it, which was absent any comprehensive or cohesive plan for dealing with the cluster's capacity. And I agree with that completely, and that's been our stance for a long time, that the forecasts were abysmally, untenably low. We suspected that we had no data from inside APS to demonstrate it, and they had great data to show that we were wrong. And so 3 years, 2.5 years have been wasted, and a lot of time, thousands and tens of thousands of hours have been wasted. And this will make another sad story in this history, which is still, those stories are still being written on the front page of the paper every day now. So we need to get, everybody wants to get through that. But I have two things to say about this, about the specifics of this point. It's our understanding from the best sources we have, which are not inside the school system particularly. We try to really pay a lot of attention and listening to what we regard as the most acute observers in the community that appear to us have had the best track record at predicting what things are going to go for the last several years. And because that's not all published, we have to do our best to try to evaluate it. Thanks very much. I'm going to plug that in. Yeah. The best predictions that we've heard right now, the ones that sound the best, most logical to me, is that given that APS seems to think that the cab situation is a significant variable, they will do nothing at least till the legislature finishes. If the legislature doesn't give DeKalb an option to vote, then this question is moot at least until a year from this fall, and that, I think, will force their hand. I mean, that'll make it abundantly clear. That's one possibility. If they do give the legislature, if the legislature does offer that, they may punt all of this until the fall. The other variable in here is where's the money coming from to meet these challenges, and that's a big, big variable. In your meetings, y'all quite accurately pointed out the cluster income and expenditure inequality. So I don't pretend to know, and have tried to stay out of it because it's been very hard to understand where they would get their money and how reliable the sources would be. But if they did come up with sources of money, another supply, I don't even want to talk about how it would happen. It's entirely possible they're going to need approximately a number that's frequently bandied around is in the vicinity of 30 million to get Howard going if Howard is the option. And they have not said that Howard is the option. What Matt said is they don't own any other building in the cluster large enough to do the job, which is not the same as saying we're going to fix Howard, any more than saying that we held the contract off means we've canceled the construction, not at all. So, but if they do those, it's possible. There are two other possibilities that could occur. One is they could go ahead with the construction minus the classrooms. Matt mentioned it as a specific possibility. So construction is not expansion. Those two terms cannot be used synonymously. They're not synonymous. The science curricula and the science folks in there claim, and I don't argue with them because we don't have an education-based curricular argument to contest them. I don't say they're right. I just, absent a good argument, we're not arguing with them, that the school would be much better off in any format if it had the two new science labs. That the rearrangement of the lobby will provide both more space and give the office a view of the entrance of the building as it wasn't built with that in mind, with those security issues in mind. That the rearrangement of the gym will give them more capacity to do phys ed inside. And most specifically, and this one I think is unarguable, and I don't understand objections to it, this is very tenable, in my opinion, that they need, in their judgment, special lanes to load the special ed students on the buses. The two straight principals have wanted that for years, and that could also be done for not very much money. And it will result in more impervious surface. But educationally, they say they need it. And again, I don't argue with them. I don't know if they're right or they're wrong, but I know they believe they do, and the school board accepts their judgment. So any of those things could happen without resulting in expansion per se. And I think that will go on for the next 50 years. All schools get remodeled and redone periodically, and it's not the same. It's also possible, as another group advocating, that even if they found $30 million to do Howard, that they ought to go ahead and do these classrooms. Again, please don't confuse my reporting with advocacy. This is reporting. That it makes sense if you're going to spend 10 or 11 million, $10 million or so to do the science labs in the classroom, to use the economy of scale that you can obtain by simultaneously adding the 7 classrooms. Whether or not they mean more kids or not, even if it means less kids, right now do that and you'll have a much better, the principal will have a great deal more flexibility for teaching and programming and music and 100 other activities that are really impoverished over there now. So I think Lola and Jennifer were both right. I don't see how we can vote or take a position on something that doesn't exist right now. And secondly, if there's been any, Lola and I were talking the other day as we looked at the budget, as we think about leaving office someday soon, about the things that have gone well and had gone, the things that have gone well and gone poorly. Nothing has gone more poorly from our point of view than Inman. It is the most frustrating thing that has occurred over the last 5 years. We've had great relations with the principals, supported the programs, got the trailers in there. Y'all have been great about supporting the operations of the school, the whole community. We worked with the other neighborhoods and got the teaching aids into the new portables. We tried to renovate 2 different fields, and so far the only thing we've gotten out of it is, in my opinion, having to fight an absurd tree loss that should have never even been contemplated. So I told Laura, the cynical part was that we have other big challenges in this neighborhood that we will talk about a little, but that we have a better chance with more powerful opponents in a way that we do with APS, because they remind me of the cue ball bouncing around in the slot machine, going in ways that you just don't know what's going to happen. So if we get good planning, if Karsarfin succeeds, God bless her for saying the right things and trying to get the show moving in the right way, then it would do a lot for everybody. And in that context, I think there's no doubt the last thing we would go for, and we've argued against it like hell from day one, is the notion that you can accommodate the middle school capacity of this cluster on that campus. You can't. It's ludicrous. And it's been, I think, obvious to all of us for 3, 4, many other things. But to say there can never be construction over there of any sort, or that if there were, you couldn't add an impervious surface, seems to me to probably not be right. It's not accurate. It won't be that way. And if they do, I'll call you in a second. If they do come up with a comprehensive plan, I think everybody should think about what it means if they really get wise. Wouldn't that be awesome? God, we would know what to do. We've been defending from this direction so long that if they came in over here and said, okay, we're going to put some extra rooms in here while we redo Howard, and I'd probably, I don't know what I would do. I'd be stunned. Sir.
So I was just going to say, Jack, first of all, and I appreciate the comment about the fact that I know you guys have, if suffered is the right word, suffered with a lot of contingents over the years that have different opinions than this particular group does. No question about it. And I'm sure they've been quite vocal. Obviously, we are the most impacted by the issues of space and traffic than the other contingents may be. If we don't have, here's my concern, if we don't have a strategic plan, why I'm asking that the association consider, even at this point, and I understand what you're saying, Lola, short of a response from APS, what is there to respond to? I'm saying a more proactive approach to the fact that I know what will happen. There'll be 8 trailers on the softball field. And without a strategic plan, 2 years from now, a year from now, there'll be 8 trailers on the field of dreams. Trailers, once they come, a trailer at rest remains at rest. Once they come, they do not go away short of a tornado. And my feeling is we need to be the tornado before the trailers come in, because they will continue to without a strategic plan. And by their own admission, they have none.